Week 5 is when it got genuinely dangerous. I was on the overnight shift, sitting in that dim little office around 2 a.m., and I dozed off. Not for a few seconds, for almost 20 minutes. I woke up disoriented, heart slamming, immediately scanning the monitors to check if anything had happened on my watch. Nothing had. I got lucky. But the what if sat heavy in my chest for the rest of the night. If something had happened in those 20 minutes, I could have lost the job on the spot. Maybe worse. I sat there wide awake on pure adrenaline and thought, for the first time with any real seriousness, what am I actually doing to myself? I still didn't have an answer. I just had a number going up in an app on my phone. Around this time, I ran into an old friend, Marcus, at a gas station at midnight, mid-shift switch, still in my work shirt from job number 2, with my job number 3 lanyard already around my neck. He looked at me, really looked, and said, "Dude, you look like you haven't slept in a week." I laughed it off, told him I was just grinding hard this summer. He nodded slowly, the way people do when they're being polite, but don't fully believe you. Then he said something that lodged itself in my head and refused to leave. "Money's replaceable. You know that, right?" I brushed it off at the time. Easy thing to say when you're not the one hustling. But it followed me home that night like a splinter I couldn't quite dig out. By week 6, exhaustion wasn't a phase anymore. It was just who I was now. Tired had become my default setting, the way awake used to be. And that's when the real cost stopped hiding. A coworker at the warehouse mentioned a short freelance project a friend of hers needed help with, decent pay, flexible hours, something I was actually qualified for. I said I'd check the email. I never opened it. I didn't have the mental bandwidth left in the day to read 3 paragraphs. I found out 3 weeks later that the project paid more for roughly 10 hours of focused work than I was making in an entire week across all 3 of my jobs combined. That one stung in a different way than the missed calls or skipped workouts. This wasn't a feeling I'd lost. This was money, real, specific, quantifiable money, that walked right past me because I was too fried to read an email. I started running numbers in my head, almost compulsively. 19 hours a day, factoring in commute time, prep time, the energy drinks, the food, the mistake at the warehouse that cost me a shift's pay and damaged inventory. I didn't like the number I landed on. And I had a feeling, a real, cold feeling, that it was about to get worse. The breaking point hit in week 7. I'd been running on fumes for almost 2 months. My body had been sending warnings for weeks. The shaking hands, the fog, the way I'd start a sentence and lose the thread halfway through, standing there mid-conversation with nothing coming out. I ignored every single one of them. Until I physically couldn't. It was a Tuesday afternoon at the warehouse. I was lifting a box when the room tilted sideways. Not tired, lightheaded, genuinely, dangerously lightheaded. My supervisor took one look at me and drove me to urgent care himself. The diagnosis wasn't dramatic. Exhaustion. Dehydration. My body finally waving the white flag after 60 days of abuse. But the doctor said something that landed like a brick. "You need to stop. Not eventually. Now!" I lost the next 4 days completely. No coffee shop. No warehouse. No overnight shift. For days of lying in bed, sleeping the way an actual human is supposed to sleep, too wiped out to even feel guilty about it at first. Here's the number that broke something open in my head. Those 4 days cost me roughly $600 in lost wages across all 3 jobs. Gone. Not spent, just unearned, because I physically wasn't able to show up. And in those same 4 days, the freelance opportunity I'd ignored weeks earlier, my coworker told me the person who picked it up instead finished the project and walked away with $4,000 for about a week and a half of focused work. $4,000. For roughly the same span of time I'd spent earning a fraction of that, while actively wrecking my body across 3 jobs. I sat with that comparison for a long time, and that's when it actually clicked, not as a vague feeling, but as something I could finally see clearly, like a chart laid out in my head. So I did the math properly. All the way through. Total income from all 3 jobs across the full 13 weeks. Then I subtracted everything the lifestyle actually cost me. Gas between 3 job sites, the fast food I wouldn't have eaten with a normal schedule, the energy drinks, the damaged inventory mistake, the 4 sick days, and, conservatively, the $4,000 I'd missed because I was too exhausted to open an email. Then I divided that final number by 1,900 hours. My real hourly rate, after working harder than almost anyone I knew, for an entire summer, was lower than minimum wage. Lower. After 1,900 hours. After falling asleep on duty. After a hospital visit. After missing calls from people I loved. I had spent the most exhausting summer of my life proving the opposite of what I set out to prove. More hours hadn't meant more money. It had meant a worse hourly rate than the job I was overqualified for and looking down on the entire time. Here's what nobody tells you about money when you're broke and desperate to fix it fast. We're taught that more effort always equals more reward. More hours, more hustle, more jobs. It should scale, right? It doesn't. Not automatically. Effort isn't the same as value, and hours aren't the same as wealth. What that summer actually taught me is a concept economists call opportunity cost. It sounds academic, but it's brutally simple once you see it laid bare. Every hour you spend on one thing is an hour you can never spend on something else. That hour doesn't come back. Ever. No amount of money buys it back. When I was stacking 3 jobs, I wasn't just trading time for wages. I was trading my best hours, the ones I could have used to rest, think clearly, or notice a $4,000 opportunity sitting in my inbox, for the lowest possible return on that time. Money lost can always be earned back. There's no real ceiling on that. Time spent is gone permanently. There is no version of that summer where I get those 1,900 hours back to use differently. They're spent. Completely, irreversibly spent. That's the actual reason time outweighs money, not as a nice quote for a poster, but as a literal, mathematical fact. Money regenerates. Time does not. The question I should have been asking from day one wasn't, how many hours can I work? It was, what is my hour actually worth, and what am I giving up by spending it this way? I didn't have an answer to that in week 1, screenshotting my rising bank balance like it proved something. By week 7, sitting in urgent care with a $600 loss and a $4,000 opportunity I'd let slip past me, I finally did. So I made a decision. Quit 2 of the 3 jobs. Keep 1. And spend the time I got back figuring out how to make my hours worth more, instead of just piling up more of them. What I did with that time changed everything that came after. So that's where things stood. 1,900 hours. A real hourly rate lower than minimum wage. A hospital bed. And a $4,000 opportunity one let slip through my fingers because I was too exhausted to even open the email. I quit 2 of my 3 jobs. On paper, that meant a pay cut. A big one. My take-home income dropped almost overnight. Everyone around me thought I had lost my mind. My coworker actually said, "You're giving up guaranteed money to do what exactly?" But here's the number that mattered more than any paycheck I'd seen all summer. Within 6 weeks, my real hourly rate had gone up by over 10 times. Not 10%. 10 times. Here's exactly how that happened, and why working less ended up making me more. Earlier in this video, I told you about the urgent care visit. The exhaustion. The real hourly rate that came out lower than minimum wage after almost 2,000 hours of work. And that $4,000 freelance opportunity one missed because I was too fried to even open the email. That number never left my head. It sat there the whole 4 days. I was forced to rest, replaying on loop. So when I finally got back on my feet, I didn't go back to all 3 jobs. I sat down with a notebook, which felt dramatic at the time, and wrote out a simple question: which of these 3 jobs is actually worth my time? Not which one paid the most per shift. Which one paid the most per hour, once I accounted for how it affected the other 23 hours of my day. The coffee shop job paid decently, and had flexible morning hours, easy to keep. The overnight security job paid fine, but was wrecking my sleep more than any of the others, since it flipped my entire schedule. The warehouse job paid well, but ate the middle of my day, the exact hours when I had the most energy to do something better. The math wasn't subtle once I actually looked at it. I dropped the overnight shift first. That one was non-negotiable, since it was the single biggest reason I was running on 4.5 hours of sleep. Then, 2 weeks later, I dropped the warehouse job too. I kept the coffee shop job. Not because it was the best money. Because it was the smallest time commitment for steady income, and it freed up the 2 highest energy blocks of my day, the early afternoon and the evening. For the first time in 2 months, I had roughly 6 hours a day that weren't already claimed by someone else's schedule. I had absolutely no idea what to do with them. The first week without 2 jobs felt strange in a way I wasn't prepared for. I'd open my laptop in the afternoon, the same time I used to be lifting boxes in a warehouse, and just sit there. I'd built so much of my identity that summer around being busy that having open hours felt almost uncomfortable, like I was doing something wrong. My bank account reflected the change fast. My income dropped by close to 40% in week 1 alone. My coworker from the warehouse texted me, half joking, half not. "You good? You just gave up 2 paychecks for nothing." I didn't have a great answer for him yet. That was the scary part. I'd made this decision based on math and a gut feeling, not on a guaranteed outcome. So I started small. I remembered that freelance opportunity I'd missed, the $4,000 one. I reached out to the same coworker who'd originally mentioned it and asked if there was anything similar going on. There wasn't, not right then. But she connected me with someone who needed help organizing data and building a simple spreadsheet system for a small business. Nothing glamorous, just methodical, detail-focused work. It paid $200 for what I estimated would take about 6 hours. On paper, that didn't sound like much. But I did the math anyway, out of habit now. Just over $33 an hour. More than double what any of my 3 jobs had paid individually. I took it. It took me closer to 5 hours, since I actually had the energy and focus to work efficiently instead of running on fumes. The client was happy, paid on time, and asked if I'd be interested in more work the following month.